you kidding me?
Dawson brings the crowd to their feet. Touchdown!
November 10th to 14th in Calgary, Alberta at the Winsport Arenas is the Rocky Mountain Classic, the 9th annual, and we are very excited to be broadcasting that on hnlive.ca. Hi, thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Dave Dawson on Hockey Talk, and we are pleased to be joined by Ross MacLean from McLean Hockey, who is a scout and will be having his eyes on some of the talent coming up at the Rocky Mountain Classic. Ross, thanks so much for joining us today on Hockey Talk, and maybe I'd love to hear just a bit about yourself and McLean Hockey and what it's all about.
Certainly. Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me on. I'm really excited to be here. Really looking forward to this event. A little bit about me. My background, currently I'm working with the Calgary Hitmen in their scouting department. The McLean Hockey organization that I run was basically an organization that evolved from some of the Hockey Canada player development programming, where I was working for close to a decade before this, helping design player development programming and minor hockey resources. It evolved when I left Hockey Canada back into McLean Hockey. We're doing just that. We're working with minor hockey associations to help provide them with resources on player and skill development and coach mentorship. And, a lot of that has kind of built into my relationship with Hockey Calgary and the minor hockey associations here in Calgary, in particular, the Northwest Calgary Athletic Association, who's hosting this event.
So when there's an event like the Rocky Mountain Classic, what's a day in a life look like? Obviously 64 games over 5 days, and there's a lot of content to be consumed. What does that look like on your side of things?
So, I mean, first of all, it's been a really challenging year for scouts, especially major junior scouts, junior A scouts, just because of the condensed schedule for everything. Our draft is in December this year. We didn't have a chance to see some of these players last year. So events like this become extremely important. And you got to be really organized when you go into events. We've got 4 games going on at the exact same time in certain instances. And so we've really got to kind of manage our staff to make sure that we're getting the coverage that we require, that we're identifying the players that we need to the most, and that we're really getting the best information that we possibly can. So there's a lot of work that goes into this from individual scouting staffs and trying to prepare for that. From an individual side, going into the events, you're really looking at the rosters, trying to identify some players that you need more information on, and really prioritizing that. So events like this, I mean, there's a handful of them throughout the year that are always crucial in normal times, but this year, this particular draft with the U15s won't be until May. But because there's a U16 draft happening in December, a lot of these kids haven't been scouted as much as they normally would be. So it just makes an event like this even more important, as there's going to be a lot of identification going on during this particular event.
And naturally, as you mentioned, because of COVID-19, the kids weren't able to get the type of exposure that normally they are. And that's where HN Live, we're really grateful to have the ability to broadcast the 64 games and other events that we've done. We've had conversations with scouts, such as the Allen Cup, where there's been a lot of people that were watching that from all over the place, and the Alberta Cup as well. Now, from your aspect, from a scout, what benefit has live streaming really made to have the accessibility to watch some of these kids?
Well, obviously, it gives you more exposure. There are some nuances with it, but for the most part, it's a great tool for identifying players. It's a great tool for being able to communicate what you're seeing. It's a great tool for the crossover element. You might have scouts in Saskatchewan that aren't seeing kids in BC very often, and all it takes is, hey, watch this game and keep an eye on number 12, and then they get an idea at least of it. Now, when we're scouting games, we're usually watching a little bit more off the puck. So sometimes you're kind of at the mercy of where the camera is during these. But in terms of what it's done for overall scouting, I mean, it's a game changer. The fact that it kind of makes it significantly easier to create your ID lists and find players that you want to go see live a little bit more and already have a base amount of information on them. I mean, you weren't able to do that before. It was really, really difficult to do that. You were really at the mercy of, grainy game clips or whatever players were sending you. And now you can actually go gather that information on your own and decide whether or not you need to get out and see that player live more. So that really, really helps, especially from an organizational side in managing your scouting staff and deploying your scouts to particular areas. It really, really makes a huge difference in terms of that aspect.
Now, Ross, what have you found has been one of the biggest struggles? Obviously, sports completely were essentially paused for an entire year, and that age group of the U15, AAA, every age group, I guess, right up to the draft year is so fragile in development. What have you found at that age group, as you've been assessing them, has been some of the biggest struggles in recovering and coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic and assessing the development from, high caliber player to maybe one who is still needs some areas to grow?
There's been some really interesting pieces that, it's a great question. We saw a lot, the vast majority of kids in this situation were sort of set to do skill development over the time where they couldn't compete in games. So there's a lot of individual skill that happens. We can see some really amazing examples of some kids that have spent some time working on particular individual skills. There was the element of kids learning how to train themselves at home with gym equipment and so on. So we're seeing also some of these kids are a little bit more advanced in terms of their personal training. What we'll really notice as we get back into the gameplay is that most of these kids are missing a little bit of that element of the structure and of understanding how the team game is played a little bit. And a lot of that's due to the fact that when they were able to play games, it was into the spring and summer, and they were mostly participating in showcase events, which, don't really provide much coaching. And they're going out and they're essentially playing, pond hockey type, trying to showcase their skill set. So that has become one of the harder elements in this to read. You can notice really quickly some players will jump off the page now with skills that are a lot more advanced than we've noticed in years past. But in terms of actually applying it to the game, there's a lot more mistakes that are happening. There's a lot more, especially early in the season. We're only a couple months into the season. You're seeing a lot of kids struggle with concepts that fit into structure. And when you're recruiting for, a junior hockey program or a collegiate program, you really want to try and make sure that there is that level of understanding that kids can fit into this. So there's a bit of a challenge with that right now. It's a nice challenge actually to have, because it's one that really is on the coaching, and the coaches have a real great opportunity here to learn probably more than they ever have in any particular season to really figure out ways to teach this and to not have to focus as much on building basic skill, which is still very, very important that they're doing, but in applying that to games now. So that challenge for coaches is really kind of helping evolve their skill set to the needs of today's player and everything coming out of this particular pandemic that we've been going through.
I have just a question, maybe from a hockey fan side of things, that you look at, player under the spotlight when you put an event on such as this, where there's so many teams and you have all the scouts watching. How do you evaluate a player's ability to handle pressure?
Well, short-term competition is really interesting in that side, because it applies pressure. Every single game is a little bit more meaningful. So, the players that do stand out in that, you can take notice. The players that you expect to that don't, you also sort of take notice. But the other side of it is there's a lot of games in a short period of time. And when you're evaluating players for that next level, that's not what you're evaluating them for. We're not evaluating them for short-term competition. But with that being said, there are some real interesting indicators that you can find in players, how they play when they are fatigued. What their frustration levels, what their mindset is like on the ice when they start to get tired, when the games start to get tougher, if their team's not doing well, if they're not doing well personally. So there's a whole lot of information that you can grab there on players through short-term competition that, through regular season play is not as readily available for you. So there is a lot more attention paid to, the mannerisms of players, their reactions when they're going to the bench, and how they're responding to particular situations and pressure. Are they getting frustrated if they can't score that goal with the goaltender pulled? Are they holding onto the puck, trying to do too much on their own in situations like that? So it really does breed whole new opportunities for you to evaluate how players react in particular situations.
Yeah, it's great stuff. I know sometimes as growing up playing sports, you get excited about this one tournament coming up, right? When I was playing high school basketball, you play certain events, but this one event you have coming up, you get really excited about. Just maybe overall the caliber of competition at the Rocky Mountain Classic. What can we expect, and what's the caliber of competition? What are we going to expect from November 10th to 14th?
Well, this is really one of those tournaments that we kind of describe as the big three. And they're sort of the major tournaments where you're going to see most of the top prospects, a lot of the better teams participating in it. And, it's one of the newer ones as well. It's only been going on for less than 10 years now. And it's really evolved every single year. This year they added a whole other dynamic to it with more teams. So it's becoming even bigger and already, considered one of the big three. So any of those events you really get excited for, because that's where you're really going to have your opportunity, especially, this one. And then there's the Bauer Invitational that happens in Abbotsford in October, a little bit earlier. They're really your first two opportunities to really see the draft class compete at a high level and against high level teams. And you see the crossover between the academies, the sports schools, and the club teams and the minor hockey association. So these events get you really excited. They're the ones you circle on your calendar. They're the ones that you're going to really start to build out your lists from and identify the top talent or the players that are going to fit your draft strategy the best. It's also where you're going to evaluate the draft class as a whole and decide, if you're a team that has, maybe a chance this year, that maybe you're going to not value your draft picks as much, or if you're a team that's rebuilding, maybe you're going to be wanting more for those draft picks. So these events are crucial in that process throughout the year.
All right. Yeah. Well, we really appreciate your time today. Maybe building off of that point, who are maybe some of the players to watch? I know there aren't really essentially rankings per se at this age group yet, maybe, but maybe just a couple of players to watch that everybody who likes to watch hockey wants to know who those exciting players are. They're going to jump off the ice. So can you maybe tease us with a couple of names that you have your eye on?
There's a lot of big names coming to this event. This is a really, really talented forward group in Western Canada. A couple Calgary area kids that are going to be showcasing their ability at a high level at this. My first one would be Nathan Bam. He's playing at the Edge Academy. This will be a really great opportunity for him to showcase himself. From the host team, Caleb Terrace, their captain. This will be a great opportunity for him as well to showcase himself against some top level competition. And then some of the players coming from some of the other areas, it's Caden McCann, who's an Airdrie-born kid who's playing for the Kelowna Rink program. So he'll be coming back and looking to make an impact as well. He has a teammate named Cameron Schmidt, who is a very, very high level, high octane player as well. The list just kind of goes on and on. Every team's got, at least one game breaker. But there are some really elite forwards that are going to be showing up for this event.
Well, we really appreciate you making time for us today. We're definitely excited about the event, and we'll catch up with you next week, Ross.
My pleasure. Thanks so much.
All right, Ross MacLean from McLean Hockey, and make sure to tune in as well later this week on Friday. I just dated the interview, didn't I? With Peter Labardius, who's going to be calling a couple of games for this event as well, and a name that needs no introduction in the broadcast world. And 64 games over 5 days, over 4 rinks, and the gold medal game will have our multi-camera production. Make sure to get your game passes as well on hnlive.ca. We'll see you next time.